2 contracts. It was 1 contract. It had 2 catalyst changes per annum for 5 years. So that's 10 catalyst changes at $1 million per change. So that's $10 million. So times 15, that's 150 million rand. I was 23, 24 years of age. I had to make that call. Just understand that there's a lot of responsibility on your shoulders to make these kind of decisions. And that's why we get paid the money we get paid. Because I know that's a question that many people ask. How much do chemical engineers get paid? They get paid a lot of money. But with that a lot of money, there is a lot of responsibility, if that makes sense. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention. So that was my world. I loved it. I was privileged. In my first year, I spent a whole month in the USA and in Belgium. My company sent me there just to get exposure. I mean, you get a company paid holiday trip just to see what other companies are doing. That was one. In my second year, I spent 2 weeks in Germany. And in my 4th year working there, I spent a whole week in Greece, also for a seminar there. So yes, with that being said, many colleagues and many people I know who have obtained their chemical engineering degrees at the Noordwes-Universiteit, I need to just put it out there, basically, they're currently working abroad. I'm thinking about somebody like Bart Simon, who is in the UK. I'm thinking about Ruan Farmer, who's working in the USA. I'm thinking about, it's the son-in-law of our school director. He's working in Australia. I'm mentioning that you could just realize you're not limited to South Africa. And then I'm thinking about Inga, who Joni also knows. This was quite funny. 2-3 weeks ago, we had a training seminar thingamajig, and as lecturers, we were trained, and the trainer, the person who presented this whole seminar, was Inga. She's now Kutsia. She used to have another surname. But she was basically, and I was so proud of her. It's a Noordwes-Universiteit alumni. She studied chemical engineering, and now she's training us to work on MedSim and to use simulation packages. Okay, so that's just in short where I was. But where do we work? We work in about every single industry you can think about. I'm thinking about, so that's the petrochemical industry. But that's not that. The whole mining industry, the minerals industry, we are in that. The food industry. Think about South African breweries. Think about beer, wine, cheese, all those things. Because there's a process involved, process engineers are there. And process engineers is just another name for chemical engineers. Water purification, things like that. Most certainly that will also be there. And then it was a question that was actually came up. I saw it earlier. Is it safe to assume that chemical engineers or being in the field can help investigate and solve problems regarding climate change? Yes, yes, and 1,000 times yes. I think over years, engineers have done a good job, but I'll be honest, I think engineers have also contributed. I'm very serious now. We have also contributed to many of the problems, including climate change, that we see today. So that's that. But because we caused it, no, I'm not saying chemical engineers did this. I'm saying engineers and human beings did this. But because mankind and womankind did this, it should be addressed, first of all, and it should be solved. And I can think about many fields where chemical engineers are involved with doing this. Things like producing, designing plants which run more efficient, using less electricity, having lower emissions. These kind of things are things that engineers are involved, chemical engineers are involved with. So I'm trying to get at that. So yes, not only do we address that, we should address that, and that's that. Right. I'm quickly going to latch onto these questions. What subjects do you need? Mathematics, 70%. That's real mathematics, not maths literacy, not technical mathematics, real mathematics, 70%. You need for physics, that's physical science, right? That's physics, chemistry, the real one, you need 70%. And then for your language, which can be either Afrikaans or English, you should have at least 60%. And then you have to have an APS score of 34. I think it's 34, 32, 34. You need that.
What about biology?
Biology, nice to have, but quite frankly, if you have then the language of instruction, mathematics, and physical science, you can do whatever you want to with the rest of your subjects. Yes, biology is good because I know For instance, within chemical engineering, there's a field of biotechnology where we work with, it's more with food production, pharmaceuticals. I mean, yes, you can study pharmacy, but who will make those medications in the end? Think about vaccines. Think about the production of vaccines. It's a very relevant thing. That whole process is a chemical engineering process. Yes, it's a biochemical engineering process, but it's still a process. So even that is involved. So yes, biology, if you want to take that, you can take that. But I took biology at school, but it's not a prerequisite. The only prerequisites are those. So it will be your language of instruction and then mathematics and physical science. Yes, if you want to take computers, something in computers, that's good, but it's not required. If you want to do additional maths, you can do that, but it's not required. So I hope that answers that question. Thank you. Right. How long does it generally take to have a philosophy degree? I assume you're talking about philosophy doctori, which is a doctorate degree. So your chemical engineering or any engineering for that matter, whether it's chemical, industrial, mechanical, mechatronic, is 4 years. Then you have your BEng. In this BEng, your honors degree is already included. A master's degree can take anything from 1 to 2 years. Let's say it's 2 years, so we're on 6. And then a PhD, well, that's a good question. Let's say you do it, you're a proper good student, and let's say 3 years. So in total, if you really want to, you can become a doctor in chemical engineering in about 8, 9, 10 years. I think 10 years might be a bit safer to say, but yes, 10 years, then you can become a doctor. Yes, that's basically that. Question 4, we've answered that. The annual salary. You know, I've been so long back, I've been in industry, but I know this. She used to be a colleague of mine. Perhaps Joni can share that, but it's always awkward talking about salary. But I'm
not sharing salaries.
Sorry, so she will not be sharing. It's very confidential.
It depends on the level that you're on. No.
That's true. Right? But I remember there was, she used to work with me, Sally. Marcel, later on she left Sasol and started working at, she became a teacher. But she left Sasol after about 10 years experience. And I know that the salary that she took home working as a chemical engineer at Sasol, that was in the region, I'll make it ballpark figure. So that's per month after taxes. But remember, she had a bit of experience, about 10, 12 years of experience. She was taking ballpark figure anything from 80 to 120,000. Let's make it broad. So let's say average 100,000 Rand net per month. So that's after deductions, medical, pension, tax, everything, 100,000. So what do you want to do with 100,000? Who tests the chemicals before you can use them? So important thing, we just need to distinguish between chemical engineering and chemistry. I think that's very important. So as chemical engineers, we work with chemicals, but you will rarely find a chemical engineer working in a lab, evaluating chemicals and doing those tests. So for that, we have chemists. So we have chemists and we have, and chemical engineers. It's not the same, even though we can do that. And we have a lot of chemical subjects which involve chemicals and molecules and all those things. But we are interested in what can you do with those chemicals to make money? How do we create a process to produce this? So, Lisa, you asked this question, what's the main differences between chemical engineers and chemists apart from the salary? Is the big thing that with a chemical engineer, I'm joking, they also get money. No, it's just, it's funny, we're making fun. So the thing is that it's totally different. So let's say a chemist will, let's say this happens, add some polymers together and comes up with this wonderful new chemical. Okay, that's done in test tubes, small scale, it's done in a lab. As chemical engineers, we now say, wow, that's awesome. We can make money from this. So we're going to take this and we're going to design a plant where you need reactors and pumps and tanks and pipes. And how big should they be? And what should the temperatures be? And a whole process, because we don't want to produce 10 grams per day. We want to produce tons per day. We want to make it big. We want to flood the market as it is required. So those, I would say, is the differences between that. That's that. And then there was a question, how many years does it take to do Boilermaker? No, Boilermaker is not our field. I'm not sure. That's not even done at the university. No, I think that's more a technical, what do you call that? It's a trade that you do, most probably at the University of Technology or something like that. But no, we don't train Boilermakers, so I cannot comment on that. Yes. But yes, so long and the short is, I think if you ask me what chemical engineers should be doing, we should be keeping the wheels of the world turning. We need to provide people with energy. We need to provide people with food. Those things are there. And then the environment. I cannot stress that enough. It's a topic, if you look at the climate change report that was over the weekend, it was published. We cannot continue as is. I have the privilege of speaking on RSG. Once in a while, I actually spoke this afternoon again. Safety is also a thing. I actually spoke about that explosion that took place at Medupi. And things like that, it's sad because those things should not happen. And engineers should design plants which are safe. Right, what sets the NWU apart from other universities in chemical engineering? Why should I choose the NWU? That's a very good question. You'll get to meet nice people like us. The long and the short is, I always refer to an example. A couple of years ago, there was a guy who studied at the Noordwes University, Jan Pieterse, and his girl, who is his wife today, he actually took a very interesting route. Studied chemical engineering, started working at Sasol. Then he did his BCom at the Vaal campus of the Noordwes University in Van der Bijl Park. And then they went abroad. He did his MBA at a university in Portugal, and currently is working in Germany in the north. And he's a chemical engineer. His wife is a chemical engineer. She studied in Pretoria. He studied here in Potch. And I love saying this. I'm actually reading a book, The Infinite Game, written by Simon Sinek. And something that he said, I read yesterday and it stuck in my mind. I will not see other universities as competitors. I will see them as rivals. A rival is somebody that helps you become better. And what I will say is, and that was Jan and his girlfriend, who is now his wife, their comments. In the end, the textbooks virtually the same. The fact of the matter is, certain aspects are more emphasized at one university than another. So one thing I can tell you that's quite emphasized at the Noordwes University, and Joni can talk about that a bit later, I would say our students compare very well when it comes to simulations. We are well trained in simulation packages like Aspen and HYSYS. And I'm not saying those things are not present at other universities. We just emphasize that quite a lot, especially if you think about fourth industrial revolution. It's things that are important. I also believe that students of the Noordwes University, especially also chemical engineers, we do well at working under pressure. We can adapt quite well. We can adapt to the environment we are placed in, and we are able to take limited resources and make the most of it. That's something that's a skill that you don't learn in a textbook. That has to do with the character of the students coming here. So perhaps it's the students coming here, perhaps it's us changing them, but the long and the short is, yes. I'm going to look here. Do chemists and chemical engineers work together? Of course they work together. Because, I mean, if you have a plant, just think natref, you have petrol, that petrol should be analyzed. As a chemical engineer, I'm not going to analyze that petrol, but that petrol will be sent to the lab and that will then be analyzed. Right. Lisa, you have a question. How can chemical engineers help with this new environmental problem? I saw these articles over the weekend, but how can we, from a chemical engineering perspective, do something? Well, let me give you an example. If you look at Medupi, 4.8 gigawatt, it's a big mammoth of a plant, right? The coal is being burned, producing a lot of CO2. You're with me? Coal also contains a lot of sulfur. So if the carbon is burnt, it forms carbon dioxide. If the sulfur is burnt, it forms sulfur dioxide. Now, two things. If the sulfur goes through those stacks, it goes into the atmosphere. And sulfur dioxide reacts with the moisture in the air and it forms acid rain. That's basically what we have. Acid rain is not good for the environment. Those SO2 fumes get inhaled by the local community. It's bad. It causes bronchitis. It causes asthma. It causes a lot of allergies. So how can chemical engineers solve this problem? You can make use of something called scrubbers. So it's a scrubber. So basically what you have is, if you think about this long chimney, at the top, there's a scrubber. So water containing lime will be poured from the top, the gas flowing upwards, the SO2 in that gas will make contact with the lime water and absorb it. And you can reduce your SO2 emissions by 90%. It costs a lot of money. That is a design solution to pollution. That's the one thing. And then the second thing, carbon dioxide. South Africa is one of the biggest polluters in the world. I think we are number 14. We might not be that good when it comes to the Olympics, but when it comes to pollution, we're right up there on the medals table. So the long and the short is, that's not a place we want to be. So how can we address that? There's a whole field of carbon capturing, where that CO2 can be captured and not released into the environment. Those are two examples where chemical engineers 100% slots in and can help with that. I'm thinking about another thing. I'll get to the medical field now. If you think about packaging, think about plastics, think about all those things. Chemical engineers are also involved in the manufacturing and in the design and in the development of packaging material which are biodegradable. I mean, we don't want more plastic. We don't. You've seen how the ocean starts to look with these bottles drifting around in that. We need to find solutions for that, and that's also for chemical engineers. All right, I love your questions. So I've answered that. I just want to make sure I don't skip any of your questions. So here we go. Moses, you're a physical science teacher at Gatelopelo Secondary School. You were a mentor at the Motorigatsi this year. So you have a BSc majored in geology and chemistry. So what you will have to do, so you already have a BSc, we can just send you the contact details of Elsa Hutton. Elsa Hutton is at the Northwest University. She can look at your academic record, and based on that, some modules might, I'm saying might, be acknowledged. It's RPL, recognition of prior learning. And they look at that, and based on that, they will say, okay, you can continue perhaps from your second year, perhaps from your third year, perhaps you get a module or two off. But it depends. It depends on where you did this BSc. Yes, so all those aspects play a role. But it is possible. It's always possible. We've seen people not the average student age, not younger than 30, entering engineering from time to time, and they really make a success of their lives because they already know what they want to do. Right. Do chemical engineers work in the medical field? If they do, what do they do? That's a good question, and it's very funny. It has happened so many times when we find students, and I'm honest now, their first choice would be medicine. They want to come into they want to enter the medicine program. And then the second choice is chemical engineering. And I was thinking about that quite a lot. Why is that so? But then I thought, oh, it makes sense. Your heart is a pump. Your liver is a filter. So the long and the short is this you're looking at now. This is a process. So it's actually not that far removed from chemical engineering. So the field of biomedical engineering, you cannot study biomedical engineering at any university in South Africa as an undergraduate program. You can't do that. It's, as far as my knowledge goes, that's not available. It is available, and I'll put it out there that you know about this, as a postgraduate program at the University of Cape Town. I think they present that. So you can contact them and find out more. But what I remember, you need a 4-year degree in engineering, and then you can go and do your master's in biomedical engineering. But you first need a 4-year degree in engineering. And that makes sense to understand the basics of engineering. But engineering can be applied in the medical world. I mean, we're working with producing artificial organs and these kind of things. I mean, there's been strides with regards to that. But I know this, especially in the mechanical engineering field, is also a bit more with prosthesis and those kind of things. But directly, Joni, if you can perhaps think of where chemical engineers work in the medical world.
Probably manufacturing tools, I would imagine. More in a pharmaceutical direction, maybe. But I'm a metallurgist, as they would call me. So I don't really know about the applications.
In medical, I agree with what Joni is saying. It would be more in the field of producing, manufacturing medication. And as I said earlier, vaccines. People tend to forget there's a process involved with that. And I know I've seen that we have every month we have IKME brings out a magazine, and they've spoken quite extensively on the production of vaccines and chemical engineers being involved with that. So that's that. But yes, I think we are quite necessary for solving a lot of problems in the world out there. And unfortunately, many of those problems were created by engineers. So they can be solved. It's not irreversible. I don't believe that. It's not irreversible. But we have to be more conscious of the environment. We need to be more conscious of people's health. Yes. Right. Any other questions? Clear. Happy. I'm just going to check. Did you see the WhatsApp group? I love this question. What's this? I once in some science fiction with alien matters, we used to change gravitation to change gravity. Spemvelo, you're asking interesting questions here. Yeah, I do believe it's possible to change gravity. I mean, the astronauts do that in any case before they go up. They have to do some zero-G kind of tests and that. But we are not that much.
Question.
Oh, you can answer
I can
that.
answer where it's applicable in processing. So I'm a mining engineer, and we like to separate things. Actually, not a mining engineer, that's something else. I'm more like a metallurgist. But we use drums that rotate really quickly to heighten the centrifugal force with ores inside the drum. And what happens if you heighten that centrifugal force inside the drum, you actually heighten the gravity pull of the material inside. So that means that your particles, which are more dense, so it has a higher weight per area, go to a certain, so they tend to gravitate towards the outside, and then your less dense particles gravitate towards the inside, and then you separate your material based on that. So it's not changing gravity, but it's using something to change gravity. And I think, but we don't do alien stuff. We're a bit far off that at this stage.
Oh, that's good. Right. But with that, I would really, it's one thing I can conclude is because it's Femmegineering, and I think this is important. And for biomedical, I would advise you, Kerapetse, I have many names, Tacho, Cananelo, and Web. I would recommend you just go onto UCT's site and check that. Otherwise, I'm going to make promises which you will keep me accountable to, which I can't do. Just check that because they are the only ones who present that. Just a last thing, and Joni, she will speak on that too, I assume. But one thing that's quite remarkable, if you look at ChemEng, and this has been so over the years when I studied, even from before that, you can check the photos, is that chemical engineering is one of the fields which have been gender equal, if I can put it that way, for 20, 25 years. And that's how it has been. That was not necessarily so in the other fields. And I can say this with tongue in cheek. The other fields are catching up. And that's good. And that's why I'm glad we have something like this here today. But one thing I can tell you, within the field of chemical engineering, we've been gender equal for, I mean, some of the other groups have, how are we going to solve this problem? We're like, we don't have this problem. And even not just gender equality, also more on the racial parity, that's also something that has improved vastly over the last couple of years, and that's nice. It's nice to see that on lecturer level. It's nice to see that on student level. So there's really been a change. And one thing that I can say, there's no reason for a woman to stand back and say, no, I can't work as an engineer, and especially not, I cannot work as a chemical engineer. I know many, if it wasn't for Wilhelmine Erasmus, who studied with me, I would have not passed. I mean, that's just the thing. And I know of so many success stories out there of chemical engineer women who are really breaking the glass ceiling and reaching new frontiers and doing excellent work out there. So please, if that's resonating with your heart, I want to encourage you, please pursue this. You will not regret it. It's an exciting world. And perhaps just as a final note is the fact that, yes, we've spoken about the technical world, but then there's also the non-technical world. I know so many chemical engineers working in the banking sector, for instance, for the Lloyd, Ernst & Young, all those things, that are very popular. Why? Because they know trends. So that's just a final note. So yes, last thing, physics. Leonta, I'll conclude with this, unless there are other questions. So the long and the short is, you are doing your first year of physics. Actually not, you've been doing it a bit earlier. It's just now the first year that you have it as a separate, it's now not combined as physical science. You're struggling with it. You're in desperate need for motivation. Go, go, go. How should you, how should you view this? It's important. It's important you have physics at least for the first year in chemical engineering. The other modules of other programs might have it a bit, but even up to the second year. But I will ask myself the first question, that is why? Why? Let's start with why. Why are you doing what you're doing? Ask yourself that question. If you have a why, you will be willing to sacrifice anything to reach that. So if you say to yourself, listen here, I want to become an engineer. And I know one of the stepping stones to become an engineer is physics. And I'm struggling with physics. I will put in extra time. Where other students have a long 10-week vacation, I will spend a bit of that time focusing on physics because I know this is my Achilles heel. I will put in more than others because I want to realize my dream. You have to take ownership of your own future. I sound not like a politician, but I really mean it, and this is the truth. No one else is going to take ownership of your future. And a word of just a warning. Many students wrongly think just pay cash down the money bills for extra classes and it will solve everything. That's not, you know what's the problem with that? I'm not saying you should not go. Perhaps extra classes is the answer. The problem I have with extra classes, it tends to result in learners in class switching off because I'm in any case paying to go to the extra class. I'm not going to listen now. So what I'm trying to say, I don't know who wrote this, Leonta, you know who wrote this, but I'm telling you, please, 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 know the why, take ownership of your own future, and the results will come. And what I see here, if you struggle now, you have to put in extra. You have to put in extra. That's just how it is. If you fall behind now, it will become very, very difficult later. So whoever you are, I'm just saying, please, if that means you need to get extra resources, you do that. If it means you need to go to the teacher and ask it, arefa. That's good. It's arefa. Good. As
Niels, can I add to your
yes,
answer?
please, Jody. Go.
So the benefit that I have is my husband is a physics teacher for grade 10 to 12. So he sees that the grade 10s do struggle with physics. And it is like that. I remember even when I was in school, and it's long ago, but I did struggle with physics in grade 10. And I finished one of the best grades in physics in the school. But the reason why physics is tough in grade 10 is because you need to start thinking about problem solving. And up until grade 9, you had I think NS, which is natural sciences. And that's a studying subject, and you tend to just study the words and you put them down on your paper, and you it's just studying. And then in grade 10, you need to start to think about physics as a type of math that you do. And that's why students struggle so much in grade 10. So when they move to grade 11, they start thinking about it as math problems, and then it comes much more naturally and much more easier. So I guess my message to you is just to keep on keeping on, and try to think about it as a problem that needs solving, and not just something that you can go look up in your textbook for an answer.
It's quite interesting. It's wonderful what you're saying. But yeah, Spenvelo, you're writing here, are you the only one who prefers chemistry to physics? No, you're not the only one. I think there are many people who love chemistry and do not necessarily like physics. But then again, there are people who love both. And then you get the opposite. I've also seen that. And it can be due to a teacher. Remember, you have a teacher perhaps, and the teacher loves physics, hates chemistry, then you will also love physics and hate chemistry, or vice versa. Or you get somebody who's so passionate about their field that you are passionate about that field. So yes, all these external factors, but I'm saying take ownership, have an internal locus of control, and you will be successful. Right, Elizabeth, that's from my side. You see, Leon, you say you love physics and you hate chemistry. But yes, to me, I just love chemistry because it's so miraculously all these things react in that. But yes, that's
I'm a physics fan on my side again.
You see, I like chemistry. I'll vote for chemistry. But then again, please note, and that's the problem that many people do with talking about physics and chemistry. Those are building blocks for chemical engineering, but don't confuse chemistry with chemical engineering. Otherwise, you'll have a wrong idea of what chemical engineering is. All right. But I'll then hand over to Joni.
Cool. Thanks, Cornel.
But Cornel, because sorry, Joni, because I see there's still a number of questions coming in for you, so you can get a rest now while we're looking.
I'll get a rest, and then at the end, I will keep an ear open, right?
Yeah. Okay, Joni, we really look forward to your a very interesting presentation. The girls haven't seen it yet, but we saw a quick glance at what she prepared. I'm very interested in seeing. Maybe I'll learn something about chemistry today.
Cool. Thanks, Lenton. Thanks, Cornels, and thanks for giving me the opportunity to talk to these ladies. And I'm hoping I can inspire some of you to follow the career path that I've followed. I'm just going to start off with a question for you guys. And I just want you to think about it and internalize it a bit. And you don't have to answer on the chat. You don't have to say anything. But just think, what was some of the bravest moments in your life? Where have you been brave? What opportunities did you use? It may have been standing up to a bully, or protecting your little sister from a fall, or just telling a friend that you don't agree with what she's doing or saying. And just think about that, and I'll come back to that a bit later. I can tell you one of the bravest things that I've done probably this week, which has only been 2 days long, but I'm speaking to you guys, and I'm sharing you my journey, and I hope that you can be inspired by my journey. And it's usually scary talking about your own personal journey and your life, but I like to do these kinds of things because it takes me out of my comfort zone. And I love just pushing my own boundaries and just taking myself out of the comfort zone and learning what I can learn. So I'm Joni Bayzet. I'm a chemical engineer, or as we call it in processing in the mining industry, a metallurgist. So I completed my chemical engineering at the Noordwes-Universiteit a few years ago, and I continued with my master's degree directly after that. So I spent 6 wonderful years at the Northwest University, and I've been working for about 4 years now. So while I was at the Northwest University, I was part of various leadership positions, and I was part of the international solar car team, which really pushed me to break my boundaries and get out of my comfort zone and learn new things about myself and about the way that I handle things and my approach to life. So after doing my master's degree, I started off as a process engineer at Anglo-American, and I was in the research and development department for 2.5 years. And now I'm a technology development specialist for Anglo-American. So I'll just talk a bit more about that at a later stage. And I know I said a lot of big words now, but we'll get to them. So as you know, Anglo-American is one of the biggest mining companies in South Africa, and we specialize in removing our precious resources out of the earth and supplying things like platinum, iron ore, and diamonds to the industry. But I think there's a lot of big words that I said now. And I think Corneel's also used a lot of big words. So I'm going to try to break down process engineering for you guys. And there will be some concepts that Corneel's already mentioned, but I think the more we repeat it and the more we talk to it, the better you can understand the industry that we're in. So as Corneel said, contrary to popular belief, chemical engineering is not chemistry. And if your friend tells you that they want to do chemical engineering because they want to do chemistry, please show them the video today, because I think chemical engineering is just so much more than just chemistry. So chemical engineering is really easy, because for anything that you manufacture, you have a recipe. And chemical engineers look at that recipe in any industrial process, and we try to make it as efficient as possible. So what does this efficiency mean? It can mean that you reduce the amount of energy that you use during your process, that you reduce the amount of water, and for everybody interested in saving the earth, water reduction is very important. And it can mean making more of the same product with less resources. So there's really a lot of different ways that we can look at improving our recipes and our processes. So I want you to think about making cookies quickly. And in the process of making cookies, each batch of cookies has to undergo a recipe or a process by combining flour, fluids, baking powder, and eggs to give an end product. And if you change any of these components, your cookies might come out differently. But I'm sure Caitlin will teach you a bit more about that later. So I haven't told you yet what a chemical engineer in the mining industry does. So I'm going to share my screen quickly, and then I'll talk you through it. And if you have any questions, please feel free to post it in the chat. Just give me a moment. Okay, so Corneel's had quite a laugh at my very colorful picture earlier. And I hope that this really breaks down what we do in mining and metallurgy for you. So if we take out our resources out of the ground, it's usually a big bulk of rock that we crush down to very small particles of rock. Now, I want you to imagine these particles as a bag of marbles. And what you'll see on my screen is our bag of marbles. You would see that there's some blue marbles, there's some yellow marbles, there's red ones, there's mixed ones, there's big ones, and there's small ones. And it's all mixed in a jumble. So what we really want to do is our final product is a combination of some of these pieces. So say my final product is the small gray heavy particles. I have to figure out a way of separating it from the rest of the particles to have a pure small gray particle stream. So if you look at size, we can separate material by size. So I've separated our marbles either by small or big. In engineering, you would typically use a sieve or a screen to do that. And as you can see, our small gray particles are all here. And then some of the bigger particles are over here. One of the other processes that we can use is we can separate them on color. So say you would want to separate them by color. You would use your eyes probably to see, oh, this is the blue particles, these are the red particles, these are the yellow particles. And you would pick them out and classify them by color. And I don't know if you like Smarties, but I do like Smarties. And I always like to classify my Smarties according to color before I eat them. Another way that we can do that is we can look at the weight of each particle. So as you can see, I separated the particles according to their weight over here. And you would use a scale, for example, to weigh how much one of these particles weigh. So on the left side, we have all our particles that are 500 grams or less. And on the right side, we have all our particles that are more than 500 grams. Another way that we can do this is we can look at whether the particles are magnetic or non-magnetic. So what you would do is you would run a magnetic over the, not a magnetic, but a magnet over the particles. And then you have your magnetic particles sticking to the magnet and your non-magnetic particles not sticking to the magnet. So all these processes exploit the different characteristics that these particles have to separate and to put them into specific classes. We haven't, however, solved the problem that we needed to solve, which is to separate the small gray heavy particles into a single stream. So what I would do is, as a metallurgist is I would look at each of these characteristics and combine them into a recipe or a process to create our final product, which is the small gray heavy particles. So in my next slide, I'll show you how I would approach this problem. So firstly, we had this big jumble of particles. We'll then put a sieve to separate them by size. So we have our big particles and our small particles each going into a stream. So we're not interested in these big particles really, so we'll just leave them over there. Then we'll take the smaller particles and classify them according to color. So these particles will then be classified to a blue, a yellow, a red, and a gray material. And then the gray material will be classified according to weight. So each particle will be weighed and classified according to how heavy it is. So at the end of the day, here at the bottom arrow, you'll see that we have isolated our small gray heavy particles. So my specific job as a technology specialist within Anglo American is to look at the technologies that we use to exploit the characteristics of the material and to find more efficient ways of doing it. So say we have a sieve on site that isn't as effective at separating the coarse material from the less coarse material. So say, for example, some of these red particles end up over here. I would look for another type of technology or another type of sieve, which can be used in the place of this sieve to give us a more efficient process. And that is basically what what's a metallurgist in the technology development sector does. So I hope that helps with your understanding on that. But process engineers don't only separate particles. Sometimes they throw together materials to form something else, as you would do with a cake, for example. And we should note that not all processes are the same, and that the process that I showed you is only the process that we would do in something like mining. So each manufacturing recipe is unique, and it's dependent on the final product that will be formed and in what industry you are. And then, as Cornel said, chemical engineering is a very wide field, and you can do anything from bioprocessing to fast-moving consumer goods. So fast-moving consumer goods, for example, is everything from getting products from the manufacturing facility to the store. So when you go buy your milk, there was definitely a chemical engineer back there somewhere developing the process for delivering it to the store. There's a lot of chemical engineers in mining, as I've shown you. There's a lot of chemical engineers in water treatment, and they specialize in filtering water and removing dirt from water and removing harmful bacteria from water. And then in terms of environmental protection, there's a lot of engineers specializing in removing hazardous gases from the air. And it's also our job within Anglo-American, even as metallurgists, to look at these types of processes and what the most safe and sustainable way is for mining into the future. And then, as you know, there's a lot of chemical engineers specifically working in the energy generation space. And that's not only like non-renewable energy like coal, but also in renewable energy, like wind power or solar electricity. Okay. So I asked you at the beginning to think of times that you have been brave. Now I want you to think of times that you've been uncomfortable. And honestly, at your age, I didn't know what I wanted to study. And I think there's a lot of girls sitting here listening to me today thinking, I don't know what I want to study. And it's tough because probably most of you have marks that are good enough to go study anything. And I was at the same stage when I was your age. And the way that I decided to go study chemical engineering and to guide my path forward was to really do some introspection and look at what I loved and what made me different and what made me unique. So I always knew that I loved math and science, and I really enjoyed studying for math. I really enjoyed science, and I always enjoyed sitting in class and listening to the teacher talk about science. So at least I knew that. I was a keen puzzle solver since I was small. So I remember that I had a gaming console that I used to take to school when I was in primary school. At that stage, it was a Game Boy, but I think the modern day equivalent will be a Nintendo Switch. I do have a Nintendo Switch in my house, by the way. So I would take my console to school, and at break time, I would play games with the boys. And the reason why I loved playing these games, so I like to play Super Mario, for example, or Sonic, was because all these games had a puzzle that needed to be solved. And as Cornelius alluded to earlier, we love problem solving, and we love puzzles, and we love challenging ourselves to just get to the next solution, and kind of putting a star on our forehead and say, listen, I've figured this out, and I know what we're going to do, and we're going to take this forward. I realized quite early that I was different from other children, because I could understand difficult concepts quite easily. But this also meant that I usually got irritated when I had to explain to other people things that I already understood. So for obvious reasons, I didn't do teaching as a career, because I would probably hang kids up on their ponytails if they didn't listen to me. So that's just a difference in personality. And at least it was clear at that stage that teaching wasn't a career for me. So I always liked challenging myself and trying out new things, even though I didn't know if I was going to be successful. And it just goes back to the question about struggling with physics. Is sometimes you just need to take a problem and bash its head on and say, listen, I'm going to sit today and I'm going to figure this out and try to understand it. And I'm sitting with this still while I'm working every day. We have research problems that we need to answer, and we don't know what the answer is, but we're really trying to find a solution at this stage. And then I think that one of the final skills that really talk to engineering is being creative, because we're not going to solve the problems that was formed in the past by doing things the same way that we've done year by year by year. So we're really looking at new ways at, for example, doing, so if I can give an example out of the mining industry, our processing plants require a lot of water to run. So just to give you an example, we use 2 times as much water per ton of ore that we feed through the plant. And some of our plants have 1,000 tons per hour of ore feeding through. So you can imagine in a country like South Africa, where water is constrained, that we're sitting with all of this water that we're using. And we need to find an alternative for it, because we won't always have water like that. So in hindsight, engineering was the perfect choice for me, but I didn't know it at that stage. And what I enjoy about engineering is that I'm still applying the skills that made me unique throughout. So that's why I asked you to think about times when you were brave or different or uncomfortable or doing something you love, because that's when our strongest characteristics come out. And when you make a career decision, it's very important to dive deep into your heart and fit your strong personality traits in with your career. So I hope that today's talk will assist you and inspire you to dive deeper into what makes you you and what makes you unique, and to identify some of the personal traits that will fit in with engineering. And I hope it helps. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Joni. It's really a very inspiring and informative talk. And you can definitely see from the comments that you really taught these girls a lot of new things, including this one of mine. I'm training them small.
That's good.
Okay, so you and Cornelius can perhaps maybe just answer the last 1, 2, 3, 4 questions, please, before we move on to the video. Cornelius, are you still there? You're unmuted. Oh, you're still muted.
I'm mute. I'm here. Where am I? There we go. Oh, yes. Right. But before I start, I just want to make a general comment. I was watching the WhatsApp chat going on, and it's the fight between is chemistry better than physics? And I want to make a very bold statement. No. And I'm going to put something out there. You are making life difficult for yourself. I'll tell you why. If you speak, I hate chemistry, guess what? You will never do well in chemistry. You will not enjoy a single class in chemistry. If you speak with your mouth, I hate physics, you will hate physics for the next 3, 2, or 1 year. You'll hate it. You will get nervous before the exams. So here's the whole thing. Why then take the subject? I'm not very straightforward. Then you should cancel that, don't take it, and go and do something else. But then you're a weak person. And you're stronger than that. So if you really want to get somewhere in life, and you need physics and you need chemistry to get there, change your attitude. Change your attitude and change your speak, because your actions will follow your words. Try that. But saying, I hate it, it's going to get you nowhere in life. And I don't think engineering is then for you, because then you will not get past the first year. I'm now very strict here, eh? I'm being very, but I'm honest. I'm honest. Life has no space for negative speak. We need to be positive. We do things. We take ownership and we go for that. Joni, do you see another question there? You can take it another one. I just since it's so close about, and I'm not saying you should love chemistry or you should love this, but you should make a choice not to speak these things. It's start by the way that you speak. Yes.
But also, I think both chemistry and physics are important, because it's not about the one or the other. It really teaches you a way of thinking about the world.
Yes. And you need both in any case. You cannot just pass the one and get 0 for the other one. You fail the module. Right. Let's see. Where is the timeline? What other factors are to be identified during the separation? Okay, but that was you. You talked about that.
Start with the 3D question, please.
Okay. Who's that?
I can answer that.
Okay, answer that. You go for that.
So in chemical engineering, we don't have a 3D design subject, but in mechanical engineering and electronic engineering, you will have that in your first year. But when I was doing my master's, I did a simulation on a water pipe, and I needed to know how to design in 3D to do that. So if you're thinking about subject choices in that space, drawing is definitely beneficial. I'm not saying everybody should take drawing, because I didn't have drawing on high school, but it does help you to think 3-dimensionally and technically about things. And which part in physical science is the most important? All the parts.
All the parts. All the parts. You know, adding to that, I think there's a misconception, even among students, to think in silos, to think, I'll pass this module and then I'm done. You know, I'll just run off to the next module and I pass it and I go on. Life doesn't work. There's a golden thread. You will build on previous knowledge, and the better the foundation, the easier it is to build from there. So it's about, and as Joni said, it's a way of thinking. Let's see, there was a question on mining. Okay. Joni, you can answer that one.
I can do that. So the parts of chemical engineering that I did was concentrating technology. But as Cornel said, there's chemical engineers, and there's chemical engineers, and there's chemical engineers. So the part I really focus on that is that when they take ore out of the earth, they send it to us. And we make sure that we send a purer product to a refinery or a smelter or wherever. Then you'd have a smelter, for example, and they'd use, where we used physical characteristics like weight and color and size to separate the particles. We would send it to a smelter where they use other characteristics like when does a particle start melting to separate more pure particles from other particles, less pure particles. So there is different spaces in mining industry which you can work in as a chemical engineer. And then, so mine is more, if you want to put it in a physics or a chemistry box, mine is more physics based. And then something like a smelter will be more chemistry based. But it all really ties in with each other. And it's also important for me to know what the guy at the smelter does, so that I know what problems I need to solve in my concentrator. And it's important for him to know what I do, because I'm giving him the product or the feed to his plant. And that's why it's important to really know your supply chain when you're doing these types of things.
I'm seeing here a question which I will take. Which would you recommend, mining or chemical engineering? That depends. It depends on who you are. It depends on what you are interested in. It depends on what you like. That's a lovely thing. You have a choice. That's what makes life very interesting. Some people would love the mining world. It's like the whole physics chemistry debate we had a while ago. Some people love the one and they hate the other one. It's such is life. And what I would recommend, Masego and Lesego, is that, yes, you will have a field that you might be more intrigued. But here's the other thing. People change jobs quite frequently nowadays. Many moons ago, you would start with a company, you would die with the company. Times have changed. People stay 3-4 years with one company, jump to another company, then they go abroad, then they come back, then they work for a mining company, then they work for a more chemical kind of company. But yes, the same principles are applied. But yes. Right, there was a question before this. It was that one about Japan. I think that's good. What other factors are to be identified during the separation of particles? I don't know whether that links to what you said, Jamie.
Yeah, so there are a lot of characteristics. Some of it include how much a particle is attracted to a bubble, so whether it likes water or not, and that's a bit more high level, and that you only learn at university. But yeah, if you think of soap, for example, the way soap works is that that your fat particle is sitting on your plate, and then you put soap on, and you have a water-loving part on the soap and a water-hating part on the soap. And then the water-hating part connects to the fat molecule, and it pulls it into the water. So that's where the chemistry really comes in the work that I do. Is it's not only about what you physically see on the particle, but it's also about diving deeper into the submolecular world, and that's really where chemistry starts to be important. I do hope that answers your question.
Right, then there was a question from Arifa Detail, and that question was, in terms of chemical engineering, how can it assist the problems in South Africa currently? I'm just now thinking from the top of my head, there are more than them, but this is one example. So one problem we have in South Africa, load shedding. Right. How can we address environmental issues and load shedding all in once as chemical engineers? I'm going to give you one example. One of the identified ways in which we will be producing electricity in the foreseen future is by means of biomass. So if I say biomass, one of the ways is you use some biomass material, you will ferment that, it will form a biogas, and that biogas will then be burned in a turbine and produce electricity. It's a more carbon neutral way of producing electricity. That whole process that I just explained, that's a biotechnological way of doing things. And as chemical engineers, we are involved with that. One of the chairs in our university specifically focuses on biofuels. So if you think about biofuels, biomass, bioenergy, chemical engineers, 100% involved there. So that's one field. Another field I can think of, this is one of those things I dream about at night. Government would just mandate all municipalities in South Africa to have chemical engineers working on their water purification plants and on their sewage plants. It should be a rule. If you don't have a chemical engineering degree, you should not be working on a water purification plant or a sewage plant.
if we just do that, I know many of you are like, I don't want to work on a sewage plant. Okay, you can work on the water purification side, right? The upstream portion. But if you have chemical engineers working there, we won't have water shedding like we currently have in parts of Joburg and things like that. If these things are properly run, it will solve many of our problems. I've addressed two things, energy and water. And I'm telling you, in some parts of South Africa, if you're from there, I have two words for you. Good luck. That's why I say we need more engineers in these fields. And here's the whole thing, engineers are willing to assist. But if you're not asked, what are you going to do? Yes, that's sad. Oh yes, are there any other questions? I have a question, is there information I can acquire that will assist me in my future career in quantum mechanics? Leanta, I'm going to throw that to you because that has nothing to do with chemical engineering.
I have no idea, but I think that is actually something that might fall under the Faculty of Natural and Agricultural Sciences and not engineering. So I will try and get you a contact person within the Faculty of Natural and Agricultural Sciences that will be able to answer that. So I will send you their contact details and you're welcome to ask them that. But I think that is maybe something that falls within the School of Physics within the Faculty of Natural Sciences.
There was one question I skipped. I don't want to skip any questions, then people get upset. In the engineering field, what is expected from chemical engineers? That's a very broad question. So perhaps if you are still online, if you can be a bit more specific, what do you mean by that? I mean, it can range from you have to be at work on time and you have to work hard. But what specifically do you mean? What is expected of chemical engineers? While you might be typing or thinking, I can say the following. I think chemical engineers normally in industry tend to become managers, tend to be responsible for projects and oversee new projects to a certain extent. So I do believe you need to be somebody who is good at planning, good at being creative and coming up with innovative ideas, and with that also be able to work with people of various levels. And I think Joni has more first-hand experience in that. You might be a chemical engineer, you might be a manager on a plant somewhere. You have to work with people with PhDs, doctorates on the one side, and with people who barely have matric on the other side. And you have to be able to communicate with all of them. Many people say, no, but I don't want to become an engineer. I want to work with people. You will work with people. You will work with people from all kinds of backgrounds. You will work with nice people. You will work with rude people. You will work with people who want to work. You will work with people who want to strike. And you will have to manage that. And again, that's why you get paid the big bucks. That's why it is. Yes. Johnny, I don't know if you want to add to that.
Yeah, and I think as a chemical engineer, and actually as any engineering professional, you are put in charge of a process, but very intricate to the working of the process is the people that need to say, I want a pipe changed. I need to tell that person, please change the pipe for me, even though maybe he doesn't want to do it that day. Maybe something happened and he's feeling down and he's really not feeling work at the day. And I think we're often mistaken in thinking that we want a career where we don't work with people, but most careers do work with people on various levels. And it's an important skill to have, is to be able to inspire people, to talk with them, to understand why and how they feel the way that they do. So yeah, it's definitely a very important aspect of engineering and actually being a professional in general.
There's one question I see here, and that has to do with Chantal talking about her dad who's thinking in processes, and she's asking, are you born like that basically, or is it something that comes over time? Well, personally, so all of you, or some of you, have gone to home affairs, for instance. You go to home affairs, you see what's happening, then you're just like, this can be changed. That needs to change. And then they go there, and it will just be better, and we can do all these people in 5 minutes. That is an inclination to being an engineer. So that comes natural to me. I walk into a place and immediately, whether it's home affairs or a wedding or anything, I'm just like, this can be done better. There is a better process, and it will bug me until I find that better process. So I don't know. As long as I can remember, that's just how I thought about things. Yes, it can be acquired, but I think some people are better than that than others. I don't know, Johnny, I don't know, but those are 2 examples. I'm just thinking about that.
Yeah, I think from my side, there is a certain natural inclination to it, but a lot of it is being learned on the job. And what I've really learned to ask in the past, like 4 years, is why? Why does it work like that? Why is the system set up the way that it is? Have we tried this and this and this to improve it? Why hasn't it worked? Or why didn't they implement it? And there's reasons, in certain cases, there is certain reasons why things are working like it does. But it's also important to question it. And only if we question these things will we drive improvement and really drive people into thinking, but what if we did it differently? And that's core to being a chemical engineer, is just understanding how we can improve this and think differently about it. Yeah, because, so for example, I have a guy who's been in the mining industry for so long, and I worked under him for a while. And we actually had a mentor talk with him the other day, and I also still have a lot to learn, because I haven't been in the industry for so long. But he also said the best engineer is somebody, from his experience, is somebody who can look at a problem and think about it differently, and just open the can of worms and let everybody fight and discuss it. And just, like, engineers love arguing about a problem. So that's the type of engineer you want to be. You want to open up a problem for people, and you want them to really think about different ways to approach it, and to think about it, and to just solve it. And I do think it does come with experience, definitely. But I think, like anything in life, there are 2 components to it. You can't go to the Olympic Games with talent and no training, but you can't go with training and no talent. So, so I guess it is 2-parted in that sense.
Okay, cool. I think that brings us to the end of questions. And I also totally agree. I can't remember a time in my life that I haven't thought the way I do now. I think I've irritated a lot of people for a long time before becoming an engineer and having an official excuse to be the way I am. But it's awesome. And it is really a privilege, actually, to be able to think about ways in which you can make the world a better place. So thank you so much, Joni and Corneels, for your time this afternoon. I really appreciate it. And we will now watch Caitlin teach you about chemical engineering in the kitchen. And she really went all out. She is a student of Corneels. And I should really congratulate him in his choice of students that he supervises, because she's really an exceptional woman, and I smile when I hear her voice. So I hope that you will end today with a smile on your face while watching the remainder of the session. If you have any other questions, please ask them in the WhatsApp, since I'm giving Corneels and Joni permission to either stay or go. So, but they will stay on the WhatsApp group until the end of the day. Then again, they're still welcome to stay the rest of the week. But if they feel overwhelmed with all of our debates, they might leave. So if you have any questions, specific to chemical engineering, I suggest you ask them today, and I suggest you ask them on the WhatsApp group if you haven't asked them by now. All right. Cool. Let me share my screen, and then once the video is done, I'm not going to come back on to tell you goodbye. So this is goodbye from me until tomorrow. I hope you enjoyed this afternoon from your interactions thus far. I assume you have enjoyed it, but I really hope that you will keep being interested and that you will enjoy everything that we have planned for you this week.
Hi girls, so my name is Caitlin van der Merwe, and just to give you a little bit of background of who I am is I finished my undergrad in chemical engineering in 2019, and I'm busy with my master's degree in chemical engineering, and I must say I am having such a ball. So today my aim is to just explain to you girls like what chemical engineering is through a very fun way. So I hope you guys enjoy it, and I hope that you will join me in the process with actually baking. So before we start, I just briefly want to tell you girls what the difference is between a chemical engineer and a chemist. So a chemist is someone who would actually go and study the reactions that happens between two substances. So they will look at the molecules, how they interact, how the bonds between the molecules will break during that reaction, where a chemical engineer would take that knowledge and apply it in a process to make a really cool product, whatever it may be. It can be something as far as petrol to something as nice as a cookie. Okay, so for today, I want us to explore chemical engineering, the process of chemical engineering, through a very fun way by making a super sweet product, which will be chocolate chip cookies. So as you girls know, as you've seen, with chemical engineering, processes are so important. Okay, so we're going to use a process today to see how can we use knowledge that chemists give and then use it in a process to get a really nice outcome. So we're going to have a few variables within our process and see what the outcome is. So before we get to the baking, I just briefly want to touch on the chemistry of a cookie. So you might sit there now thinking, oh my goodness, like I came and signed up to hear about chemical engineering and we're gonna have a baking show now. So it's actually more than that. So when you're in the kitchen baking, you're actually a chemical engineer, because there's crazy reactions that happens within the dough while it's in the oven, while you're beating the egg. So let's look at the process of what happens with the cookie. So when you place the cookie in the oven, what happens is firstly the butter will start to melt. So on an engineering surface, we can say that the cookie is losing its structural integrity, which means if you have the ball, it's starting to melt and losing that structure and then spreading out. So after that, the cookie starts to raise. What happens there is the water inside the cookie starts to change into vapors, steam. And then the cookie will actually start to rise because of that steam exiting it. So then you will see, when you bite into a cookie, there's a few holes inside. It's because of those vapors, and also because of the baking soda or baking powder, whatever you use in your cookie, we will get to that. It changes into carbon dioxide. So then also these pockets start to form within the biscuit, and then the vapor will exit it. Okay. And then the last process that happens inside the biscuit, which is that's where the magic happens. There's two chemical reactions that takes place, where the one is caramelization, and the other one, it's a really funny word. It is the Maillard reaction. So that what happens with caramelization, the sugar the white sugar. We will use white sugar, but also brown sugar, but it actually turns into this brownish color as it caramelizes. And then with the Maillard reaction, not only does the sugar react and turn into brown, sweet substance, but the protein within the egg and also the protein in the flour starts to react. And that just gives us the nice brown look and also a very nice toasty taste. So that is just briefly what the chemistry is within a cookie. Okay, so now for today, what I want us to do is I want us to, manipulate some of the processes and see how the cookie is that comes out in order for us to get the best cookie ever. Okay, so I don't know if you guys know, but if you obviously know this, but if you buy an Oreo biscuit in the shop, okay, you buy it today, it will taste the same when you buy it in 5 months' time. Why is that? So it's obviously because they've got a fixed process that they're using. So if you're done with your studies, studying chemical engineering, you can go and work at Sasol producing petrol, or you can go and work at a food company producing a fruit product. The very important thing is you're going to learn how to optimize processes, how to make it good and efficient and also cost effective, and to leave your customer with a really good product. So I know baking a cookie, this might not seem that important, but when it comes to a product being reliable, knowing, okay, if I buy this product today, it won't look different when I buy it later. That's a huge thing when you're a consumer and you buy a product. But then it can also get that intense of like having a process where you have to create petrol where machines might break if the petrol is not like good enough or on the standard. Okay, so with all of that said, what we're gonna do is we're gonna make a plain batch of chocolate chip cookies. Then we're also gonna go and we're gonna take that batch, we're gonna freeze the dough, like the whole just dough in the freezer, and also freeze balls of dough. And then we're gonna see like how different does each batch look with one another. We're gonna compare it with one another. Then we're also gonna go and change out the baking soda and also add more baking soda, add more flour, just to see like, man, how does the product actually change? And then I hope at the end of this whole process, you will say, man, I have created the best chocolate chip cookie ever, or the one that you like. So if you like a chewy chocolate chip cookie, we're gonna get to that. Or if you like a hard crunchy one, we're gonna get to that. Okay, so let us start with the process. Okay, so we're first just gonna do a plain simple chocolate chip cookie batch. Okay, so I hope you've got all your ingredients and the bowls required for it. Okay, so the recipe that we're gonna follow, I have halved it for us because we're doing tasting now to see which process is the best. In the future, if you have found your best chocolate chip cookie recipe, you can just double this one. Okay, so first we're gonna add 1 1/8 cup of all-purpose baking flour. Okay, so because I halved the recipe, I don't have an 8 measuring cup, so I'm just gonna use half of a quarter, as you guys can see. Okay. Okay, the next thing, we're gonna add 1/2 teaspoon of baking soda. Okay, then half a teaspoon of salt. And that is that. So we're going to put our dry ingredients just to the side. Girls, this is really important. I've made a huge mistake. And as you guys know with the heading of this video, processes matters, okay? So I didn't sieve it. So if I kept it like this, there would have been clumps, and then your cookie dough wouldn't have been that nice, okay? So we're just gonna sieve it. Remember, processes matters. So here we might have just gotten a lumpy cookie, but man, if you're gonna have to design that petrol, that's gonna be a bigger problem. Okay, so we've sieved it. Now we can put it to the side. And now what we're gonna do is we're gonna add our butter, our sugar, and we're just gonna mix that together with our vanilla extract and then add an egg. Okay, so we need half a cup of butter. So because, yeah, just to simplify it for you girls, if you buy butter, you will see there's 100-gram marks, okay? So 250 grams is 1 cup, so obviously 125 is half a cup, okay? So you can use 125 grams of butter. And just very interesting on this, it's important to, like I said with the Oreo cookies, they've got the same product that you will buy in a few months' time. So when you have a really nice process, remember to do exactly what you did. For example, if I take the butter now out of the fridge and I cut a piece and I put the butter to the side and I use that butter again later on in an hour's time, what will happen is your cookie will actually come out different, because when you use melted butter or softer butter, your dough will be more wet, and then when you put it in the oven, it will just start to spread very quickly. Okay, so if you like that, then melt your butter, melt it in the microwave. But if you don't like it, just put your butter back in the fridge. This is actually a variable. So if you want to go like after the session and be like, I want to actually see what will happen if I use fridge butter versus room temperature butter compared to melted butter, that will be a really cool process to check out, and you will see some cool results. Okay. Okay, so because I am not gonna use different butter temperatures as a variable, I have to put my butter back. Okay, now just to make the process a bit easy for us, I'm just gonna just cut the butter in pieces. When we mix it, it will just help a lot. My granny gave this tip of actually grating your butter. So if you've got a grater at home, it would be good to grate it. But this will also work. Okay, perfect. Now we're gonna add our sugar. So it's gonna be a 1/4 cup of sugar. So 1/4 cup of white sugar and then a 1/4 cup of brown sugar. So if you want a cookie that has more flavor in, then you can use just brown sugar. But as we're checking out processes for this batch, this is our standard baseline batch, which we're gonna compare everything with. So for now, we're gonna use white sugar as well as brown sugar. Okay, that's my white sugar. Brown sugar. And then we need to put in half a teaspoon of vanilla extract. Okay. Perfect. Okay, now we're gonna use just an electric mixer and just mix it together. And after like the batter is soft, then we're gonna add the egg in. Okay. Okay, so my butter is really cold, which is fine. Just have a lot of sugar everywhere. Okay, so we're gonna put in 1 egg. Okay, and then beat it again. Okay, now that we've done that, we're gonna beat in the dry ingredients. Okay, so you can just get your dry ingredients. Okay, and then add it. It's gonna look like we've got like the dust is gonna be everywhere right now, like as it is. Okay, now that we've done this and have sugar and flour everywhere, we can add our chocolate chip cookies. Okay, so we're gonna use 1 cup of chocolate chip cookies. I'm just using half a cup, so I don't think I'm putting in 2 cups. Chocolate chips, not chocolate chip cookies. Okay, and then just use a spoon. I love using a wooden spoon for this because it's quite intense mixing it, but I am not the strongest person, so maybe you are stronger than I and you can use a plain spoon. So just mix in the chocolate chips. Okay, now that it's mixed in, what we're gonna do is we're gonna separate it into 3 batches. Okay, so the 1 batch, we're just gonna leave it at room temperature, gonna put it in the oven. And the other batch, we're gonna put the dough in the freezer, and then see, just to compare it with one another, like what would happen if you just put the dough like that in the freezer. Only for 60 minutes, 30 to 60 minutes. And then also we're gonna make balls of the dough and also place it in the freezer for a bit of a longer time. Okay, just to see like what would the difference be if we had to do that. Okay, so half of this with 1/3 of this. Just gonna place into okay. So this we're gonna place like that, like just a ball of dough in the freezer. And what we're gonna do now is we're gonna go and roll out a few balls. Okay, so because we are tasting things, we need to make sure that our balls of dough is the same size. So if you had to go and you just had to take out dough with your own hand, make a ball, put it down, and then want to compare the sizes, because you know I mentioned that with butter it will the diameter will be bigger because the structure changes, so it will spread out. So if you have microwave butter, it will spread out more. Okay, like that would happen. So if we would want to compare that, we can't compare something that we didn't use the same process for. Okay, so I'm gonna use this to make sure that all my balls are the same size. So at the end, when we compare the sizes and the one looks a little bit bigger than the other, then we can say, oh yeah, it's because of this and not because I didn't actually measure the dough. Okay. So what we're just gonna do is roll out balls of dough. Okay, these ones I'm gonna place in the blue container, just because we're gonna put that in the freezer. So we're gonna freeze those balls. So we're gonna make only 3. You can make more. This is just to taste things for us to compare it. So if you want to make more, you can make more. I'm only gonna make 3. So yeah. This is a very messy job. So your hands will definitely get dirty, but it's nice to have some fun, especially with all the stress that you girls have had with exams. So it's fun to get your hands dirty a bit. Okay, so we did our frozen balls, or the balls that we're gonna freeze. So I'm gonna put them in the freezer. Okay, so now in our freezer we have the batch of dough that's just placed in like that. We also have our balls, and now we're gonna just roll out balls. That's gonna be our standard baseline cookie that we're gonna compare all the others with. Okay, so just the same size. And again, we're gonna do 3 of them. Okay. So I really like baking paper. So it would be great if you have baking paper at home. You can just place it on your pan, and we're going to place the cookies on top of that. Should you not have baking paper, you can just use spray and cook, or you can just grease your pan. But yeah, baking paper is amazing. So we're gonna place our balls on the baking paper. So now that we have rolled out our 3 balls of dough, I have placed it on the baking tray. Okay, so now we're gonna preheat our oven. Okay, we're only gonna do it now because our other the other day still in the freezer, and we need to keep it there so that it can just get a little bit colder for a little bit more time. So in the future, if you bake chocolate chip cookies and you don't want to put it in the freezer, you have to preheat your oven when you start baking the cookies. Okay, so remember, processes matters. Okay, so you might think, oh, what's the difference between preheating the oven now compared to preheating it in the beginning? When we have dough in the freezer, we waste electricity. And if we don't have dough in the freezer and we only wait till this step, we waste time. Okay, and we know it's so sad to admit it, but time is money in the industry. Okay, if you can make a process quicker, then it means you can have more product in the same time that you would have used. Okay, processes matter. Okay, so we're gonna put the oven on 190 degrees Celsius, just preheat the oven. So about half an hour has passed now. Our oven is ready, and this has been in the fridge for enough time. And now what we're just going to do is for the one that's still just plain batter, or that's not in a form yet, I'm going to roll it out again with using again just a spoon to make sure it's the same size. Okay, so this might be a bit harder. You will actually notice that when you use the plain dough, it was super sticky to your hands, where now it won't be that sticky, and that's because the butter is very hard. So it's not as wet. Okay. You have to remember now. Okay, so my first row is just plain, the plain standard chocolate chip cookie. My second row is the dough that was placed in the freezer, and my third row would be the balls that was placed in the freezer. So obviously these balls are much harder than the dough that was in the freezer, because we broke the structure and rolled it a bit, so it's a bit softer than this one. Okay, so remember that. If you want to, go and mark on your baking sheet, this is what this one is, this is what this one is, and this is what this one is, just at the top of each row, for you to remember, okay, wait, this cookies is just the standard one, and that one is the fridge balls. Okay. Okay, now what we have to do is we have to make sure that they're spaced well, because if they melt and expand, so that they don't touch one another. So you can just space them, but keep them in the same line for yourself to remember, okay, wait, this is, just to know which one is what. So I just spaced it like that so that it can expand nice. Now we can put it in the oven. Okay, so you're going to put it in for 9 to 11 minutes. So put your timer on for 9 minutes and just go check. If it's not nice and golden as you would like it, then just keep it in for another minute or two. Okay, so I just took my cookies out of the oven. Mine took a little bit longer than 9 minutes. Mine was about 11. Okay, so as you can see, there is the different changes. So I still have the normal ones, the big chunk of dough that was in the freezer, and then also the balls that was in the freezer. Okay, so let's quickly look at the different cookies. Okay, so as you can see, okay, so these ones that were in the freezer, the balls, as you can see, they actually melted. So because they were frozen so firmly, when they were put in the oven, it was as if they melted and just slipped a little bit. Okay, then the next one was the chunk of dough that was placed in the freezer. So I don't know if you can see, it is much smaller than our normal one. And that is because the butter in this one was cold. So when it was placed in the oven, the butter didn't melt as fast as our standard one did, therefore making it a smaller cookie. So yeah, if you want a smaller cookie, you can just place it in the freezer that the butter is cold, and we will just break it open as soon as it has cooled down. Again, processes matter. So if I have to take these cookies off right now, they're extremely soft, so I will just break them and they will just crumble. So it needs to cool down for a bit before we can just break it open. Okay, so I have cleaned all my appliances, equipment, and now we're gonna do our next taste. Okay, so for this one, we're gonna compare two types of cookies with one another. We're gonna do one where we add more flour to our recipe, and the other one we're gonna add more baking soda. Okay, so when we add more powder, this must make the cookie more thicker, and if we add more baking soda, it will make it more cakier. So that is what chemistry says. So we're gonna go and we're gonna try this now. So for the first one, we're gonna add, instead of 1 1/8 cup of baking flour, we're gonna add 1 1/2 cup of baking flour. Okay, so I have made the one with more flour in, and I've rolled it out so it's on the tray. Okay, so next we're gonna go and we're gonna make one where we're gonna add more baking soda. So instead of using half a teaspoon of baking soda, we're gonna use 1 full teaspoon of baking soda. Okay. Okay, so I have just made the one with more flour and one with more baking soda. So we're gonna pop this into the oven for, again, about 9 to 11 minutes. So you can just check what's working for your cookies. So if it's ready at 9, you can take it out. If not, again, let it just stay in for 2 more minutes. So now this batch is out of the oven, and you can actually see the one that has more flour, it's much more higher and it looks more dense than the one that has more baking soda. So you can also just see the one with more flour is much more brown, and the one with baking soda, it actually looks a little bit more yellow than the other one. So now we can let this cool. At the end we will compare it to all the others. Now for the last one, I went and I changed the process a little bit. I thought of, instead of using only baking soda or only baking powder, I'm gonna use half baking soda and half baking powder. Okay, so I'm just gonna take that out of the way. Okay, so now for our next one, the recipe again is going to remain the same, at the start, like as I mentioned at the beginning. The only thing that will change now, instead of using half a teaspoon of baking soda, we're going to use a quarter teaspoon of baking soda and a quarter teaspoon of baking powder. Okay, so now it's on the trays. I've rolled the balls. Okay, and again, I only made 3 because I'm just tasting it. So you can make, again, a lot more. So I'm going to just put them in the oven again for 9 minutes, 9 to 11 minutes. Okay, so this is the end of our whole baking process experiment for you to see how different processes actually produces different products. So as you can see, we've got our plain one and the frozen batch. Again, I mentioned this previously, but because the butter was cooler than the plain one, it's actually a smaller cookie size. So it didn't melt as fast as the plain one did, therefore the diameter is not as big. And then again, I told you guys this, but with the frozen balls, because it was frozen, it actually like melted it a bit and you've got a weird form with that. Then with the one with more flour, you can see it's much more firm. And the one with more baking soda, so it obviously produced more carbon dioxide than with the other cookies, therefore producing more holes in the biscuit and also making those cracks. So the last one was the one that we tried to make a nice one, combining different methods where we used half baking soda, half baking powder, and for my opinion, this is my favorite one. As you can see, it's not as flat as the plain one, and then also it doesn't have as many cracks, therefore not as many holes in the biscuit as the one with more baking soda. So yeah, this was so much fun. I really hope that you enjoyed it. I hope that you learned something about processes and how important processes is. And also, when you're in the kitchen, you're basically a chemical engineer. So thank you for listening to this whole just presentation on chemical engineering through baking. And I hope that you will join our engineering family. Bye.